In this Ben Shapiro Show, Ben talks about how Joe Biden's approval ratings are not looking good. According to Real Clear Politics, he is currently underwater by approximately 11 points, with Reuters Ipsos having him down by 14 points. These are terrible numbers for an incumbent president. Even the general election numbers are no better. The last few polls of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump show that they are tied, according to the Economist YouGov poll, or with Trump leading by 6 points, according to the ABC News Washington Post. The election is not a foregone conclusion, and the same is true for Ron DeSantis, where the polls show they are essentially tied. There are rumors about the financial connections Joe Biden's family has, with Republicans in the House investigating the issue. Representative James Comer of Kentucky, who is part of the House Oversight Committee, said that there is solid evidence that Joe Biden lied when he said his family never took money from China. Comer is suggesting that there is an informant inside the FBI with information regarding this issue, and he fears for their lives. Americans' trust in organizations like the FBI has hit rock bottom since the Trump era. Joe Biden is also experiencing failure at the border. Though many are trying to spin the situation as a win for Biden, the reality is that there was a massive influx of people before Title 42 ended on Friday. However, after the state authorities in Texas put barbed wire along the border in the most trafficked areas, resources were brought to bear, and the vast wave of people dwindled. Last week marked the single largest week in terms of the number of illegal immigrants attempting to enter the United States via the southern border. In excess of 83,000 illegal immigrants attempted to enter the United States last week alone. Despite the overwhelming numbers, the Biden administration insisted that everything is under control, and they are doing an amazing job. Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, claimed that they have done an extraordinary job on the border, and that they have been planning for months with increased resources at the border, such as asylum officers, border patrol agents, processing coordinators, and expansion of holding capacity. However, the Texas National Guard is actually doing the heavy lifting, with Greg Abbott attempting to stop people from crossing the border illegally. Mayorkas also revealed that they are seeing fewer illegal border crossings because they have broadened the pathway for asylum, allowing asylum seekers to claim asylum at the border and be released with a cell phone. The Biden administration is claiming victory at the border and portraying it as an act of heroism, just like they did with the Afghan pullout, which ended up as a complete disaster and leaving Americans behind, including green card holders. The Texas National Guard is responsible for preventing unnecessary illegal border crossings, but the Biden administration is taking the credit for making great strides in border protection. Ben highlights President Biden's expansion of lawful pathways for asylum seekers and refugees, but note the importance of delivering consequences at the border to manage it effectively and cut out smugglers. He discussed how the president's approval ratings are tanking, putting his re-election bid in jeopardy. Additionally, they mentioned the recession that the U.S. economy is currently facing due to prolonged corporate profits downturn and 2 consecutive quarters of earnings declines. They talk about the inflation numbers and interest rate increases, which are weighing on Joe Biden's administration. Furthermore, they discuss the president's solution to his 2024 race, which is playing the race card, which the speakers find problematic. Joe Biden's recent speech at a historically black college and university is mentioned, where he urged that America is deeply and inherently racist, highlighting the ongoing battle for the soul of the nation. Ben then criticizes Joe Biden's use of race-baiting tactics in an effort to appeal to black voters. Shapiro argues that Biden's pitch is twofold. First, that the Trump administration is fascist, and second, that the only thing standing between black Americans and re-enslavement or resegregation is the Biden administration. Shapiro criticizes Biden as a schmuck who accuses people of racial crimes simply because he disagrees with them. He points out that race relations in the United States were actually good until Obama's second term, which saw the rise of identity politics and a focus on racial division. Shapiro argues that Biden is trying to rev up the race-baiting machine, citing his "you ain't black" comment and the fact that he pays homage to Al Sharpton. Biden claims that we are in a battle for the soul of the nation, but Shapiro is skeptical of this language, calling Biden a soulless politician. Shapiro questions who is truly being silenced about racism, pointing out that Biden remains silent about certain types of crime and chooses his allies very specifically. Shapiro argues that the most important election in recent history was not 2016 or 2020, but 2012 when Barack Obama ran on an explicitly racial basis, parceling out populations group by group. Shapiro argues that Obama won in 2008 by running as a great unifier, but in 2012, he pushed Obamacare and ran on an identity politics platform focused on racial division. Biden is following the same strategy, according to Shapiro, trying to appeal to black voters by revving up the race-baiting machine and creating divisions based on identity. Ben Shapiro also criticizes Joe Biden's recent statement in which he claims that white supremacy is the most dangerous threat to America. Shapiro argues that while he takes white supremacy seriously, it is not the greatest threat facing Americans today. He suggests that there are other serious issues, such as illegal immigration, economic recession, rising China, and the falling apart of the American family that Biden should be addressing rather than focusing on white supremacy. Shapiro cautions that Biden's speech is not talking about a group of nutjobs responsible for mass shootings, but rather suggests that everyone who does not mirror Biden's political priorities is a white supremacist. Shapiro quotes Biden's speech on the issue of racism, stating that racism has long torn us apart. It's a battle that's never really over, but on the best days, enough of us have the guts and the hearts to stand up for the best in U.S. to choose love over hate. Shapiro also comments on Biden's casual racist remarks and suggests that Biden implies that white supremacy is being enabled by an entire substructure or superstructure in American society, and not by a group of white supremacists alone. Ben Shapiro discusses the recent comments made by Joe Biden on his commitment to appointing the first black woman on the Supreme Court of the United States, calling her brighter than the rest. Shapiro notes that Biden has no evidence to back up his claim. Furthermore, Shapiro points out that if the race was reversed, and a presidential account stated that they appointed a white man to the Supreme Court who was much smarter than everyone else, then it would not be acceptable due to casual racism and insinuating that a person's race affects their intelligence. Shapiro also discusses how Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, at his commencement address for Howard University graduates, called white supremacy the major domestic terror threat in the country. Shapiro argues that this is part of the administration's goal to broaden out their attack on anyone who disagrees with them. Shapiro further points out how the media is excited about these statements. Shapiro also mentions a recent march by a group called Patriot Front in Washington, D.C., where 200 of them walked near the National Mall, putting American flags and shields into white U-Haul vans after marching through that Capitol for about an hour. Although some of them were arrested, Shapiro does not believe that this group was controlled by the feds due to the lack of evidence. Shapiro also quotes Simone Sanders, former Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris's spokesperson, warning that the Supreme Court of the United States could make black history illegal. Shapiro points out how odd it is that the feds and media are quickly linking isolated events like the Patriot Front March with white supremacy and the overreaching of the Supreme Court. Shapiro delves into the case of Jordan Neely, a homeless black drug addict casing trouble on a subway. Neely was apprehended by Daniel Penny, a former Marine veteran. Shapiro points out how the media has sensationalized and politicized this event, labeling it symptomatic of white supremacy and applying this label to various other unrelated situations. A stranger who was on the subway with Penny when he put Jordan Neely in a chokehold has come forward to defend Penny's actions, saying that Neely was threatening passengers on the train before Penny intervened. The woman who witnessed the incident said she was praying for Penny and thanked him for his actions. The host criticizes the Neely family's lawyers for pushing for a murder charge against Penny, saying that it looks cynical when they only step forward when something bad happened to Neely. Shapiro points out that the case has quickly turned political, and anyone who defends Penny might be labeled as a white supremacist. The media's reluctance to report on the race of suspects in non-white/black incidents is also a topic of discussion. Shapiro also talks about an incident in a subway station in Queens, New York. 3 men were slashed, and the suspect's race is unknown. He further notes that the media will try to shoehorn this incident into the greater narrative of black-white relations, even though there seems to be no correlation. Shapiro then condemns the left's pro-criminal agenda and praises Good Samaritans like Daniel Penny, stating that they should be supported. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida also defended Penny and tweeted about defeating pro-criminal George Soros-funded district attorneys. Shapiro adds that DeSantis may have launched his presidential campaign, as he has already visited Iowa and had a successful political weekend by attending events in the state. Shapiro also mentions that Donald Trump canceled his Iowa visit, citing weather concerns, but speculation suggests he did not want to appear before a small crowd. DeSantis potentially outmaneuvered Trump by visiting the same location and showing up when Trump did not. Ben Shapiro mentions that DeSantis recently spoke in Iowa and did well in terms of retail politics. He also emphasizes that DeSantis did not mention Donald Trump by name during the trip. Instead, he focused on the idea of rejecting the culture of losing that has infected parts of the Republican Party. According to Shapiro, this will be a key tenet of DeSantis' campaign. One of the advantages that DeSantis has over other Republicans who may run for president is his successful record as Florida's governor. Shapiro highlights several conservative policies that DeSantis put in place in Florida, including low taxes, fiscal soundness, school choice, and tough stances on immigration, abortion, and crime. Shapiro notes, that DeSantis put in place a 6-week abortion ban and has strengthened tort reform in the state. Shapiro also talks about potential areas of criticism that DeSantis could aim at Donald Trump during the campaign. One of them is the fact that Trump put Dr. Anthony Fauci in place and left him there, despite Republican dissatisfaction with Fauci's advice during the pandemic. DeSantis may also criticize Trump's stance on immigration and the border wall. Ben Shapiro notes that Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has been making local connections and has raised around $4.3 million for various Republican groups through his speaking events across 8 states. In contrast, former President Donald Trump raised money for organizations that may not have used the funds appropriately, such as in the 2020 Georgia runoff race where he raised money for himself. However, Trump's entertainment value is acknowledged to be higher than any other human, while DeSantis focuses on substance and conservative policies. The hosts also contrast Mother's Day messages from Trump and DeSantis, with Trump's message being more entertaining and inflammatory and DeSantis' message being more personal and family-oriented. Casey DeSantis is also noted as being an asset for DeSantis' campaign due to her charm and ability to connect with people. Shapiro asserts that Trump is the frontrunner and currently has more support in polls, but suggests that the race has not yet begun and that DeSantis may challenge Trump in the primary. The segment also discusses a joke that Shapiro tweets on every Mother's and Father's Day until the left can explain why children need fathers and mothers and why they are distinct from each other. The host also criticized the left for promoting the idea that single motherhood is superior to other forms of motherhood, and for denying any differences between men and women, which has led to absurdities, such as a man being celebrated on Mother's Day. Ben criticizes the way Mother's Day is being celebrated by the left-leaning media. He expresses his frustration that people are being pushed to celebrate anything other than biological mothers on Mother's Day. He brings up an article from the Washington Post that focuses on the mothers of queer culture and suggests that the left is more concerned with recentering the marginalized than celebrating biological mothers. Ben argues that this is not what Mother's Day is about, and that it's an attempt to erase the importance of motherhood. He mentions the CNN article that claims children can grow up at an advantage with a single mom. But Ben refutes this by citing data that show children of single moms report more distressing family conflicts and live at lower socioeconomic status. He argues that while there is no data proving the superiority or equality of life outcomes for people who grew up with a single mom versus 2 parents, the left is trying to downplay the significance of having both a mother and a father in a child's life. Ben says he appreciates the left's honesty in expressing their views that men can be moms and that mom has no meaning, but he disagrees with their approach and thinks they are wrecking the true meaning of Mother's Day. The Washington Post recently published an article about a black pastor named Isaiah Stewart and his efforts to teach people in his constituency to learn how to use guns responsibly. The article is titled, "Carrying a Bible and a Gun. A Pastor Tends to an Unsettled New Orleans," and it praises Stewart for becoming a licensed firearms instructor and teaching people how to obtain a concealed weapons permit. Ben Shapiro argues that this article defies the typical narrative pushed by the left that gun owners are a threat to society. He also notes that the left's defunding of the police in areas like New Orleans has made the Second Amendment even more important for law-abiding black people who are being victimized by crime. Shapiro then transitions to expressing his distaste for the promotion of LGBTQ plus topics in children's television, specifically mentioning Blue's Clues. He states that the show is promoting trans nonsense to children as young as 3 to 5 years old. He goes on to say that the show has included graphics of characters carrying gay pride flags and even hinted at a beaver character having top surgery. He argues that this type of content should not be introduced to children without parental pre-screening of the show. Ben Shapiro mentions that he is working on creating kids' content for his viewers. He mentions that many people have been asking about it and promises that the content will be amazing. Shapiro explains that the purpose of creating the content is to provide parents with a pre-screened option for their children, so they don't have to worry about inappropriate content such as references to breast removal on a show like Blue's Clues.